Welcome to Derek's Zoo Videos, my little corner of the internet where I share my passion for the zoological world. Today, to celebrate my 1,000 subscriber milestone, I'll be counting down my personal 20 favorite zoo exhibits that I've seen so far. Before we begin the list, to provide some context, my personal preference is towards larger outdoor complexes that are geographically themed. I appreciate naturalistic habitats, good cultural theming, unique concepts, and exhibits that have at least a few less commonly displayed species. Finally, my personal experiences obviously play a role as well. For example, Memphis's Northwest Passage and Teton Trek are both excellent exhibits that should be in strong consideration for this list, but due to focusing on filming other areas of the zoo on my visit, I didn't really spend enough time in them to appreciate them in a way that would land them a spot among my favorite exhibits, something I do plan to correct if I am ever able to make another trip to Memphis. With that said, let's jump right in with number 20, Hubbard Gorilla Valley at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo. Before I visited Omaha, I had a decent idea what to expect from other of the zoo's top exhibits that we'll come to later on this list, but Gorilla Valley was somewhat of a surprise. Everything about this complex exemplifies the modern zoo experience. There's a large indoor space with natural substrate that actually mixes the gorillas with other primates, a rare occurrence in the States. There's multiple large outdoor gorilla habitats that are well furnished and can be viewed from a multitude of unique perspectives along the winding indoor path, bringing you nose to nose with the apes and even taking you into their domain. There's overhead space for the apes to make use of, and in the middle is a multi-level mixed species habitat also viewable from nearly every side, where I finally had some good luck with a yellow-backed duiker. And throughout the entire complex there are educational, interactive, and even museum-like displays that could keep you engaged even if all the animals were hiding. Moving right along to number 19, Habitat Africa at the Brookfield Zoo. A refreshingly different take on displaying African wildlife with more indoor elements than most African-centric exhibits, as well as an emphasis on the forest and the unique Kapi biome in addition to the more commonly replicated savanna. Where this exhibit really shines though is the species. Outside of the giraffes, Habitat Africa stays clear of the most well-known African species in place of lions and zebras, which can of course be found elsewhere in the zoo. There's painted dogs, okapis, klipspringers that I have yet to successfully film, and two kinds of duikers. But what I really appreciate is the exhibit not forgetting about Africa's smaller creatures. There's free-flying birds, dwarf mongooses who recently welcomed pups, monitor lizards, the wonderfully bizarre elephant shrew, and of course, the complex's and arguably the entire zoo's crown jewel is the white-bellied pangolin, the only one on display in an AZA zoo. Staying in Africa, but taking a big jump up in wow factor, we have the Heart of Africa at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Spectacular, jaw-dropping, and awe-inspiring are just a few of the words that come to mind, and if I was grading this list on quality alone, this complex would certainly be ranked higher. The centerpiece is a huge, sprawling, mixed-species savanna that reportedly comprises about 80% of the complex's total 43 acres. Placed in front of the savanna are lions and a rotational waterhole habitat that both blend beautifully with the savanna behind them, and on one of my visits, I was able to catch the cheetah run that takes place in the waterhole space. Across from that is a standalone habitat for the cheetahs and a campsite-inspired exhibit for vervet monkeys, the only place I've ever seen this species, probably because they are actually very common in the wild. Finally, it goes without saying that, because it's Columbus, the theming is top-notch. At number 17, a zoo and exhibit I visited for the first time last year, Toyota Elephant Passage at the Denver Zoo. Denver is one of the few places you'll find a bachelor herd of elephants. The zoo's 6 bull Asian elephants can rotate through 5 habitats and participate in daily demonstrations with their keepers at the Elephant Passage Theater. But the elephant passage isn't all about elephants. Indian rhinos and Malayan tapirs can rotate in at least some of the elephant yards. Gibbons can swing right above the visitor pathway. I had way more luck with their fishing cats and clouded leopards than I usually do at other zoos, and there's some smaller critters as well. The theming is well done, and most special of all, this is the only place I know of where an elephant could walk right above your head. Staying in Colorado for number 16, Rocky Mountain Wild at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. A zoo that every enthusiast should visit at least once to experience the incredibly unique setting. Of all of Cheyenne Mountain's exhibits, Rocky Mountain Wild impressed me the most compared to my expectations prior to my visit. I love when zoos are able to take advantage of their existing landscape instead of building man-made landscapes, especially for local wildlife that fit right in those natural habitats, and this exhibit is a great example of that. There's beautiful habitats for grizzly bears, Mexican gray wolves, and one of the AZA's few moose, whose exhibit is practically barrierless at the pond. The mountain lion exhibit is really 3 combined habitats, including one with enclosed viewing that allows the cats to walk right over the guest. Next up, the African Journey, the only area of the Fort Wayne Zoo that I haven't toured yet, though that will be remedied fairly soon. Though the design is very different, this exhibit shares some positive qualities with Brookfield's Habitat Africa, like the representation of copy and forest habitats and the less commonly displayed fauna. While I do miss the phased out honey badgers, species like the swamp-dwelling Sitatunga, spotted hyena, bat-eared foxes, banded mongooses, and servals all add a more unique element to the complex. There's also 5 species of primates and a variety of birds of all shapes and sizes. There's one of the most underrated amazing lion habitats in the country, and I also like the large central savanna with its numerous vantage points around the entire complex that guarantee you'll find its residents somewhere along the way. But what really sets this exhibit apart for me is the beautiful landscaping and the fog that frequently surrounds you at the start of the trail, creating an alluring ambience that sets the tone for your African journey. Number 14, the Polk Penguin Conservation Center at the Detroit Zoo. This exhibit is something of an anomaly on this list, since it goes against much of the criteria I outlined in the intro, being an indoor exhibit comprised of just a single habitat. However, that doesn't really matter when you're talking about a habitat that is as jaw-dropping as this one. Over 80 penguins from 5 species, including some of the few chinstrap penguins on display in the country, live in this single habitat. The penguin space is impressive just from the above water view, but where things get truly magical is the lower level, with a more standard but massive underwater viewing window and 2 tunnels that allow the penguins to swim all around you, including above your head. In addition to the habitat itself, the building is themed around Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition, with several museum-esque display rooms as well as more interactive elements. Most notably, the ramp to the lower floor places you on Shackleton's ship, with bubble windows that show video of ocean-dwelling creatures. Moving to the Lone Star State, with Texas Wild at the Fort Worth Zoo, somehow the first exhibit on this list that I've already toured. Despite all the newer additions at the Fort Worth Zoo from their Wilder Vision master plan, this 2001 complex was still my favorite part of the entire zoo. Of course, to say that Texas Wild isn't new would ignore the newly reimagined Mountains and Deserts region that reopened last year. This area is just one of the 7 sections that make up this extensive complex, the first 2 of which don't even focus on animal habitats, but rather you're first introduced to Texas Wild with a comedic cemetery amongst other theming before you reach the true welcome, an entire simulated town. That really sets the tone that this is no ordinary zoo exhibit. From there you're taken through 5 Texas ecosystems, coming across everything from dinosaur-like alligator snapping turtles to adorable burrowing owls, vibrant roseate spoonbills to prowling big cats. While most of the habitats themselves probably won't blow you away, with the exquisite theming and thorough collection of Texas native wildlife, everything else about this exhibit is practically perfect. Switching things up a bit at number 12, Animals of the Night at the Memphis Zoo. Nocturnal exhibits are always exciting to come across, not just because of the unique concept, but because they almost always harbor some of the rarest zoo species, which is certainly the case in Memphis's Animals of the Night. The building's many less common residents include aardvarks, bush babies, six-banded armadillos, tamanduas, spotted genets, ringtails. Memphis is one of only 4 AZA zoos where you can currently see a potto. There's some of the very few banded palm civets on display in the United States, and the same could be said for the owl monkey. There's pygmy slow lorises and the even more rarely displayed red slender loris. And on top of all that, the building's rarest animal is the bear cuscus, the only individual on display in the entire Western Hemisphere. This incredibly rare collection alone lands this building the number 12 spot, since the habitats themselves, while well furnished, probably wouldn't wow you, but they don't really need to, and it lets the animals themselves be the stars. However, it is why Animals of the Night was beaten out by number 11, Kingdoms of the Night at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo. Same general concept, similar amount of rare zoo species. This is another of the 4 zoos where you can find a potto, and I was able to see my first ever spring hares and brush-tailed porcupines. But what really sets Omaha's nocturnal exhibit apart is the swamp, a winding boardwalk that takes you through a swamp at night. The water surrounding you on every side is full of turtles, alligators, including a leucistic individual, and even beavers. The whole experience is eerie, thrilling, and definitely one of a kind. What's most impressive about the Kingdoms of the Night's ranking on this list is I didn't even see all of it, since the Australia section featuring echidnas, less commonly displayed Tamar wallabies, and even freshwater crocodiles was closed off for construction, but that just gives me an excuse to go back to Omaha someday. Entering the top 10, the River's Edge at the St. Louis Zoo. Though I thoroughly enjoyed my visit to the St. Louis Zoo and currently have it ranked as my 4th favorite zoo, many of the zoo's exhibits don't conform to my personal preferences, with the exception of the River's Edge. As the zoo states themselves, this was their first immersion exhibit, a winding pathway that takes you through 4 continental sections, viewing animals that you may expect to find near rivers and waterways. The best of the complex's naturalistic exhibits is the series of habitats for the zoo's Asian elephant herd, which not only offer the giants sufficient room to roam, but are also one of the few elephant complexes to have almost exclusively natural barriers, something that is prevalent all throughout the River's Edge. There's also one of the country's increasingly few remaining sun bears, a rare, large outdoor tank with cave viewing featuring Missouri native fish, and of course it never hurts when an exhibit features my 2 favorite animals. Going right back to Omaha with the famous Lied Jungle, the exhibit that first really put the Henry Dorley Zoo on the map and paved the way for all of the world-class exhibits that have followed, ultimately creating one of the best zoos in the country. Though I did notice at present the geographic sections are not necessarily adhered to anymore, and the collection has downsized a bit, the building on its own is still a jaw-dropping experience. From the expansive views of the open jungle from the top floor to the more intimate experience of the lower floor that places you amongst the forest floor. As I just mentioned, the building has lost some species, but those that remain still give a thorough representation of rainforest diversity with a variety of primates, free-roaming birds, numerous reptiles and amphibians, and a handful of other large and small mammals. Some standouts include elephant shrews, spotted-necked otters, and a single Mueller's gibbon. Even 33 years after it opened, this is still one of the most must-see zoo exhibits in the world. Number 8. North America and the Polar Frontier at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. I may be slightly cheating by combining these 2 sections together, but they do fit together well. This is the only exhibit on the list that has significantly changed since I last saw it, with the front half of North America being reimagined and reopened earlier this year, but from the photos I've seen, the new habitats do seem to hold up to the high Columbus standard. The second half of North America has wolverines and some of the few moose in AZA zoos, in addition to a few other more familiar North American zoo species. The polar frontier, added in 2010, has more complex theming, a fantastic brown bear habitat, and one of the very best polar bear exhibits in the US, with the potential for magical viewing experiences. Continuing Omaha's takeover of this list with the Desert Dome, an iconic landmark of the Henry Dorley Zoo. This is by some metrics the world's largest indoor desert. The trail takes you through 3 of the world's deserts, representing Africa, Australia, and North America. Along the trail, you enter in and out of caves filled with reptiles, while the more open sections are home to a host of birds and small mammals. Of Omaha's 2 most well-known exhibits, I slightly prefer the desert over the jungle for its more uniform high quality throughout, and mostly still following the geographic theming. One highlight for me was the predator-prey setup with the peccaries and an appreciatively active ocelot, while the only uber-rare zoo species that comes to mind is the African wildcat. The desert, like Omaha as a whole, has many species that are, to some degree, less common to find in American zoos, including klipspringers, dwarf mongoose, hyraxes, parenti monitors, and one of my favorite birds, the burrowing owl. Number 6 is like no other exhibit on this list, the ProMedica Museum of Natural History at the Toledo Zoo. A natural history museum, reptile house, insectarium, greenhouse, and more, all packed into one building. When you enter, the main room has dioramas full of life-size replicas of prehistoric creatures that once roamed Ohio. The rest of the lower floor has exhibits showcasing Ohio's modern-day habitats, including a sturgeon touch tank. The greenhouse can be viewed from both levels and has free-roaming poison dart frogs. In my opinion, the top floor is where things get even more exciting. There's a room for arthropods, including the impressive coconut crab. Opposite that is an entire room for venomous snakes, and in between there are even more reptiles. There used to be sea kraits, an extremely rare zoo animal, though as of my last visit they are no longer displayed here. But on that same visit, I did have a very personal up-close encounter with one of their Komodo dragons. All in all, this building is the definition of a one-of-a-kind zoo exhibit. There's no exhibit I have more personal connection to than number 5, Wild Africa at Binder Park Zoo. Not only have I been visiting this zoo and this exhibit basically since I was born, but I more recently spent a season as a keeper for the savanna animals. Speaking of the savanna, I don't think I'm being biased when I say it is Wild Africa's and the entire zoo's best feature. 18 acres of hills, grassland, sand pits, and woods for the zoo's giraffes, zebras, ostriches, 4 types of antelope, and a few others to roam. The viewing is also varied and expansive, which means you should be able to spot all of its residents somewhere along the way. But Wild Africa has a lot more to offer. There's cheetahs, painted dogs, and a more wooded habitat for lions, which you don't see often. There's not 1 but 2 species of mangabeys, a primate group that is disappearing from the US, and an honestly awesome habitat for red river hogs. Though some elements of this have been lost over the years, there's still some solid theming and anti-poaching messages throughout, and of course I have so many special memories of this exhibit. On one of my more recent tours, we explored number 4, the Northern Trail at the Minnesota Zoo. This is probably the easiest exhibit on the list to sum up why I love it so much. 10 of the largest and most natural habitats I've ever seen for mostly Asian and North American ungulates, including some of the AZA's few moose, speedy pronghorns, and takin, a species that, while not uncommon in the US, is still unfamiliar to much of the general public. On top of that, the Northern Trail is home to not 1 but 2 massive tiger habitats, creating easily the best tiger complex I've ever seen, and perhaps the best in the entire country. Most impressive of all, most of these habitats opened with the zoo in 1978, and if you add in the newer Russia's Grizzly Coast, which is part of the same loop, has excellent habitats of its own and grade A theming, this is easily one of the finest quality exhibits you'll ever come across. Kicking off the top 3, the wilds of Africa at the Dallas Zoo. Another exhibit that is defying its age with high quality habitats throughout. And unlike the majority of African exhibits that focus on one biome, usually the savanna or forest, the Wilds of Africa has a little of everything. There's penguins of the South African coast, cheetahs on the savanna, gorillas and chimpanzees of the forest, currently with youngsters in both troops. There's several bird aviaries, including a large walk-in aviary that has hammerkops and hooded vultures. Klipspringers navigate the Kapi, and hippos and Nile crocodiles represent Africa's rivers, all coming together to create a well-balanced mix of large and small, star and lesser-known species from all different habitats. And honestly, if the zoo is ever able to restore access to the habitats that were previously viewable from the defunct monorail, the Wilds of Africa could challenge for my number 1 spot. Number 2, the exhibit we just toured, the Asian Highlands at Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo. Of all the amazing exhibits at the Henry Dorley Zoo, the Asian Highlands is the most tailored to my specific preferences. It's a large, outdoor complex that is geographically themed, with habitats that range from good to among the best I've ever seen. In fact, the Takan Ridge may be my favorite single zoo exhibit I've seen on my travels so far. And there is a few rarities like the bizarre Pierre David steer. On top of that, the theming, signage, and storytelling is extremely well done, and I personally enjoy the National Park vibe that the complex takes on. It's honestly hard for me to find a single flaw in this exhibit, though I would recommend visiting in cooler weather than I did, when you would hopefully have more luck seeing certain of the Asian Highland species more active. With all that said, however, for me, it still couldn't top number 1, Asia Quest at the Columbus Zoo. Comparing the two directly, I would give the edge in habitat quality to Omaha's Asian Highlands, but the Asia Quest exhibits are still excellent in their own right, including some more unique designs, and when it comes to the species list, there's no comparison. Asia Quest gives a more complete sampling of Asian wildlife from multiple different regions, ranging from 13-ton Asian elephants to bats and birds. In terms of more rare zoo species, there's markhors, Pallas's cats, chevrotains, water monitors, and silvered leaf langurs. The element that really makes Asia Quest stand out from other exhibits, though, is not just the immersive theming, but the one-of-a-kind conservation-inspired displays that teach about extinction, the threat facing so many species, even some that can be quite commonly found in zoos, and that is what solidifies the Asia Quest for me as my number 1 pick. And there it is, my current top 20 favorite exhibits from the 29 zoos I've visited so far. Thank you again for 1,000 subscribers, and let me know in the comments what qualities you prefer in zoo exhibits, and of course share your list of your favorite exhibits as well.